My knowledge is in engineering and naval architecture, and I'm here to learn about what big data and so on can do. So I'm here with one mission in mind, to suggest to you that the oceans are very important and to request you to give some thought to bring your talents and your knowledge to helping us better understand the oceans in order that humankind benefits from it. So the oceans are very, very important in a general sense for climate change. So the oceans are controllers of climate. So we put together a team of experts who looked at three facets of ocean space. So we looked at commercial shipping, naval defense, and the third was broadly what we call ocean space. And we looked to see how technologies will look like in those sectors, in those spaces in 2030. This is future gazing. So we identified 8 technologies. So starting with big data analytics. In 2030, big data will be big in ocean space, really big industry. So what do we mean by that? So the oceans, as I said, are uncharted. 95% of the space we don't know. We need to know it. We'll need special techniques to look at bringing together large volumes of different kinds of data, some of which will relate to physical properties of the ocean, some chemical properties, some may be biological, some may be of a numeric kind, some may be visual, some may be of auditory nature and so on. So we need to be able to look at combining all these different sets of information. The data will be gathered from platforms. And we're saying that the future, one of the technologies, will be having autonomous systems. We've heard in the newspapers about drones. Now, these are more than drones. Drones are piloted. These won't have any human intervention. So we can see autonomous vehicles that will be given a function, that will be given a task, and they'll be given a boundary within which to operate and some constraints, and the vehicles will then go and do the task and keep giving the information back to wherever they've been asked to give, and they'll operate in a safe manner. And these are vehicles that will have the sensors, which will then gather the information, which will then be transmitted. So the third sort of aspect about where we get the data from is sensors. So that's a technology for 2030. So this is the shape of what will be, what the ocean space will look like in 2030. So we'll see lots of sensors that will be generating the data, which you will then use to calculate and do all your analysis and manipulations. But the sensors will be distributed across the bays of the oceans. They will be distributed through the depth of the oceans. They will be distributed or looking at the natural environment. But they'll also be looking at anthropogenic activity. So if we put a ship in there, if we put an offshore structure, if we start a mining activity, so any human intervened activity will also be having lots and lots and lots of sensors which will be generating the data. So why do we need this, and why are we saying that this will happen? And we are saying this will happen. So it's not a case of may, it will. So the more people can start thinking about it now, the more they will be at the forefront of leading what the ocean space looks like. Humanity has to adapt to climate change. It is a fact. So climate change is a fact. The Earth is warming. The oceans are regulators of climate. We will have sea level rise. So there is a need for us to prepare ourselves for that. The other thing that is likely to happen is more probabilities of high or extreme events, hurricanes, cyclones, tsunamis, things like El Nino and so on. Because of the global warming, there may be, if you like, the El Nino effects coming in, and there's likelihoods of storms and frequencies going up. So we need to prepare for that. The second point on the right here, a significant proportion of the world's population lives very close to the coast. About 40–50% of the world's population will be within a few tens of kilometers of coast in 2030. A few tens of kilometers. They will be affected by what's going on in the oceans. So we need to prepare for that. The world population is increasing. And to feed them, yes, we have to use the land resources better. But I can see more and more use being made of the oceans to sustain ourselves from the point of view of giving food. So food production and particularly protein intake will become very important. We identified 3 key missions for deploying of this technology. Why, in addition to making profits, why there is a social need for this. And we said the 3 important things are protecting the people, us, number 1, we protect ourselves first. The environment we live in, protect the environment. And lastly, we have to sustain ourselves. We have to have food and energy. So these are the missions. So we have identified in the report what each technology can do, for example, in terms of protecting the people, how, for instance, they can help with early warning, how, for instance, they can help with things like situation planning. So it's things that are of use to us, and that's where we need the big data coming in. How can we protect the environment? So we have to live with this environment. And we have to sustain ourselves. So we have to protect the environment. So what can we do in terms of better climate prediction and condition monitoring, ocean climates? So that is going to affect the life of, as I said, almost all of humankind, 50% directly, immediately, who are living close to the oceans. So the data that we get from the oceans is going to help in terms of climate. Is going to help in terms of how we use the oceans responsibly. So currently, for example, the fish that we get from the open seas is not enough to sustain. We have been overfishing. So how can we responsibly use the resources so that we get the fish and the other food stock for us? What do we need to cultivate? So how do we get aquaculture in? So those are things that we need to use the big data. We need big data, so food, I've said already, but that's something we need. We need food, we need energy, we need medicines, and how can we use the data that we gather from the oceans, process that to identify where do we look for medicines.